My name is Rachel Adams. I'm 32 years old, and I work as an emergency room nurse in Austin, Texas, the kind of job where every shift feels like a battle fighting to save lives, holding hands of strangers in pain, and sometimes holding my own breaking heart together just to make it through another day. But if you asked me a year ago if I'd ever be where I am now, I would have laughed, because back then, I thought I had everything: a stable marriage, a husband I trusted, and a life worth fighting for. Brandon Cooper, that's his name, 34 years old, a fitness coach and TikTok influencer who built a following preaching self-worth, strength, and what it means to be a high-value man. On camera, he's confident, charming, even inspiring, but behind closed doors, things weren't as simple as his Instagram stories made them look. We'd been married for 5 years. I worked grueling 12-hour shifts in the ER, picked up extra hours when I could, so that we could afford the little luxuries Brandon enjoyed. He didn't make much from coaching, so I covered the bills. I told myself that's what love looked like: sacrifice, partnership, trust. Then Charlotte came back into the picture. Charlotte was my college best friend, someone I hadn't seen in years until she showed up at our doorstep one weekend, fresh from Scottsdale, California. She had changed. Her sunny college self was replaced with a new edge, an Instagram content coach persona, preaching women's empowerment but wrapped in manipulation. She spoke in phrases like "know your worth," "never settle," and "demand what you deserve." The kind of motivational stuff that sounds good but somehow felt sharp, like a blade hidden in a velvet glove. She was here to catch up with me, she said, but soon. Her visits turned into long conversations filled with pointed remarks about my marriage, about how women shouldn't have to justify every purchase or settle for a man who doesn't invest in their future. At first, I brushed it off as typical friend drama, the kind of talk that circulates over wine and long nights. But deep down, I felt something stirring, a quiet whisper of doubt, a crack in the foundation of what I'd thought was unshakable. One night, after a particularly exhausting shift, I came home to an eerie silence. The house felt cold. I headed to the kitchen to get some water and overheard voices in the living room. At first, I thought it was the TV, but then I recognized the voices: Brandon and Charlotte. They thought I was upstairs and spoke loud enough to be heard. Charlotte's voice was steady, persuasive. "Rachel deserves better. Brandon, when was the last time you really showed her she matters? You say you love her, but love isn't just words or gifts. It's investment, real investment." Brandon's voice was defensive but tired. "I bought her that necklace 2 weeks ago. I work overtime for her. What more does she want?" Charlotte laughed, a low, bitter sound. "It's never about what you give, Brandon. It's about what you make her feel. You've gotten comfortable, too comfortable. She needs a wake-up call. She needs to know she has options." My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. I wanted to scream, to confront them both, but my legs wouldn't move. I felt frozen in place, betrayed, helpless, shattered. The conversation went on. Charlotte coached Brandon on a plan. "Tell Rachel you need space, a week away, to think about everything. Make her sweat a little while you explore your options. Women like to have backup plans. It's smart. He needs a reality check." And just like that, I realized I wasn't the woman they talked about anymore. I was a project, a challenge, something to manipulate. The betrayal wasn't just infidelity, it was the cold, calculated manipulation by the two people I trusted most. The next morning, Brandon sat across from me at breakfast, avoiding eye contact, nervous energy leaking from every movement. He fidgeted with his coffee cup. Words caught in his throat. "I think we need some time apart," he said quietly. "Maybe stay with Charlotte for a bit. Figure out what you really want." I stared at him, disbelief burning behind my eyes. After last night. This wasn't a surprise, but hearing it made my chest tighten, like a fist squeezing the last of my hope. Space, I whispered. You want space because of her, not because of me. He didn't answer. That day, the weight of it all crushed me in silence. I packed a small bag, more numb than angry, and waited for Charlotte's car to pull up. As she drove away, I watched with a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning of the unraveling. How do you fight for a marriage when the people you love have already decided to tear it apart? What happens when taking space is really just a cover for betrayal? The days that followed were a blur of quiet desperation. Brandon left that morning with Charlotte, and for the first time in years, I was alone in our home, the walls echoing with memories that now felt like ghosts haunting every corner. I tried to hold myself together, telling myself this was just space, a necessary pause, but deep down, I knew it was something darker. The silence was suffocating. Every text from Brandon was carefully measured, distant. Charlotte's presence loomed over every message, every decision. She had planted seeds of doubt so deep inside me that I started questioning my own worth. Was I really settling? Was I really invisible in my own marriage? Her words replayed in my mind like a relentless soundtrack. You deserve better. You're worth more. Don't let him make you feel small. At the hospital, I threw myself into work. But even there, the pain followed me. Every time I saw a couple, I wondered if their love was real or just a fragile illusion. Every time I held a patient's hand in their final moments, I felt a stabbing loneliness because no one was holding mine. The weight of betrayal was crushing, but it also sparked something fierce inside me, a determination not to be broken. One night, unable to sleep, I pulled out my phone and hesitated before logging into our joint bank account. I wasn't sure what I was looking for: confirmation, maybe, or closure. What I found instead was a gut punch that turned my blood cold. There were charges I couldn't explain: hundreds of dollars at a steakhouse downtown, lavish hotel stays in the city, brunches that would have fed a small army, all of them on our shared credit card. My hands shook as I scrolled through the transactions. The dates lined up with Brandon's absence, but something else unsettled me more. There were also payments sent to my Venmo account from someone named Mike, an unfamiliar name paired with a heart emoji and notes like dinner and movie. I replayed every conversation, every smile, every touch Brandon had given me lately. Had it all been a lie? Was my husband living a double life, funded by the money I worked so hard to earn? The thought was unbearable. I reached out to Elijah Rivera, a lawyer I had met years ago when I treated him in the ER. He was more than just a lawyer. He was someone who understood the vulnerability that comes with betrayal. I sent him screenshots, transaction records, and videos that a TikTok follower anonymously shared with me, clips of Brandon and Charlotte live streaming, laughing together as they planned to handle me behind my back. Watching those videos, I felt a bitter mix of rage and disbelief. How had I been so blind? Elijah didn't sugarcoat the truth. Rachel, what you're dealing with is not just infidelity. It's calculated manipulation and financial abuse. You have every right to protect yourself, and we're going to make sure you do. His words, firm and steady, felt like a lifeline. As I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, a wave of clarity washed over me. I realized that waiting for Brandon to come back and explain himself was a mistake. I had to take control of my life, my future. It was time to fight back, but not with anger or impulsiveness. I needed a plan. The first step was clear. I had to secure my finances. I called the bank and, with Elijah's guidance, began the process of removing Brandon's access to our joint accounts and canceling the credit cards he had been using. Every call, every signature felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of power that had been slipping through my fingers for too long. But the battle wasn't just financial, it was emotional. I spent nights writing in a journal, pouring out everything I felt: the betrayal, the heartbreak, the humiliation, but also the fire burning inside me. I forced myself to confront the truth that no matter how much I loved him, Brandon had already made his choice. One evening, as I was packing a box of memories, photos, gifts, keepsakes, my phone buzzed with a message that twisted the knife further. It was from Tommy, a coworker and friend who didn't know the whole story. "Hey, Rachel. My girlfriend saw Brandon out with some girl yesterday. They were holding hands, laughing like nothing's wrong." The casual tone in his message was a slap in the face. My stomach churned, and for the first time, tears streamed down my face, hot and relentless. The man who was supposed to be my partner was out there, living a life I was excluded from, funded by the very money I earned. The silence in my home grew heavier, a constant reminder of what I had lost. And yet, amidst the pain, a new resolve emerged. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. I would show Brandon and Charlotte that betrayal has consequences. I would use every tool, every piece of evidence Elijah and I gathered to dismantle the facade they had built. The countdown to confrontation had begun. But how far would I let this go? How much could I endure before the scales tipped in my favor? The next steps I took would set everything in motion, the moment where survival turned into justice. What happens when the person you trusted most turns your life into their playground? And how do you fight back when the odds are stacked against you? The days following Tommy's message felt surreal, like I was living outside my own body, watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion. Brandon's betrayal wasn't just a whisper behind closed doors anymore. It was loud and public, exposed through texts, bank statements, and now eyewitness accounts. Every detail I uncovered added fuel to the fire burning inside me. And yet, I kept my composure on the surface, because I knew the real fight was just beginning. I met Elijah in his office the very next day. The walls were lined with books on family law, and the faint smell of coffee lingered in the air. I laid out everything I had: screenshots of transactions, Venmo payments, the TikTok videos, even Tommy's text. Elijah nodded, his face serious, his fingers tapping methodically on the desk. "Rachel, this isn't just about cheating. This is financial misconduct, emotional manipulation, and possible fraud. Using joint funds to bankroll an affair, courts take this very seriously." His words were cold but powerful, like the sharp edge of a blade I was finally ready to wield. He explained the process: immediate removal of Brandon's access to joint accounts, cancellation of credit cards, and preparation of divorce filings. We discussed protective orders if necessary, especially since Charlotte seemed like a manipulative force driving the deception. But Elijah warned me this wasn't going to be easy. Brandon was charismatic and could spin a story to sway public opinion, especially on social media. "We need to be airtight," he said. "Gather every piece of evidence, no matter how small." Leaving his office, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I finally had a plan. Dread because I knew the confrontation would unravel everything: friendships, family ties, and the life I thought I knew. That evening, I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by memories boxed up like relics of a past life. Photos of us smiling on vacations, gifts exchanged with love, now felt like bitter reminders. I stared at a framed picture of Brandon holding my hand at our wedding. The smile on his face looked like a mask now, a facade hiding the truth. My hands trembled as I set the picture down and opened my laptop. I started writing not just emails or legal documents, but a blog, a chronicle of my pain and strength, a place where I could reclaim my voice from the silence. But just as I was beginning to feel some control, another blow came. A notification popped up, a message from Charlotte. Having the best time with Mike. This break is exactly what I needed. How are you doing? The words hit me like a slap. The casual cruelty of her message, like a dagger twisting in my chest, made my hands clench into fists. I stared at the screen, fighting the urge to reply with fury. Instead, I deleted the message, swallowing my anger. I knew reacting emotionally would only give them more power. Days passed, and Brandon remained silent, except for vague texts about needing more time and space to think. Each message was a reminder that he was still out there, living a double life funded by the very money I earned. I decided it was time to take a bold step. I changed the locks on our house. It was symbolic, but powerful, shutting the door on a chapter of betrayal and uncertainty. The physical click of the new locks echoed like a drumbeat, signaling the start of my fight. Word started to spread quietly through our circle. Friends and family reached out, some offering support, others asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. My parents were a steady source of strength. My mother's voice was calm but fierce when we spoke. You deserve better. Rachel, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Those words became my armor. Yet, not everyone was on my side. Brandon's family called voices dripping with condescension and disbelief. His sister lectured me about forgiveness and the sanctity of marriage, as if weeks of lies could be erased with a few kind words. His mother, attempting sympathy, suggested I was being too harsh, that every marriage has its rough patches. It was as if they were trying to gaslight me, rewrite history to protect their own. I held back tears, feeling the isolation grow, but also steeling my resolve. If they thought I would crumble under pressure, they were wrong. Meanwhile, Charlotte remained a ghost in my life, popping up in indirect ways, tagged in social media posts with Mike, gleefully flaunting their new life. I found myself obsessively checking their profiles, each photo a fresh wound. But within that pain, I discovered a strange source of motivation. Their arrogance made me realize how much I needed to finish what I started, not for them, but for me. One afternoon, Elijah called with news that sent a chill down my spine. Rachel, I found evidence Brandon filed for government relief funds using your name. That's fraud. It strengthens your case immensely, but it also means things might get messier. Be prepared. I sat back, heart pounding. The man I loved was not just cheating, he was betraying me at every level, risking everything we built. I made a silent vow. He wouldn't get away with this. With Elijah's guidance, I carefully compiled every document, every message, every transaction. I hired a private investigator who uncovered more late-night hotel bookings, secret meetings with Mike, and countless lies. It was a web of deception that threatened to engulf me, but I clung to the truth like a lifeline. The night before I was set to file the divorce papers, I couldn't sleep. I walked the empty house, touching objects that once brought joy but now felt cold. I found Brandon's gym bag tucked in a corner, still smelling of sweat and betrayal. I held it, the weight of it sinking in. Tomorrow, everything would change. But what I didn't know yet was how far Brandon and Charlotte were willing to go to keep their secrets buried, and how far I was willing to go to bring the truth to light. The morning sunlight spilled through the blinds, casting long shadows across the living room where the boxes of memories sat untouched. I stood by the window, gripping the folder Elijah had handed me the day before the divorce papers, laced with evidence meticulously compiled over weeks. Every photo, every bank statement, every secret message was now part of a legal arsenal I was ready to wield. I had rehearsed the confrontation 1,000 times in my head, but the moment Brandon stepped through that door, nothing would prepare me for the flood of emotions to come. Brandon returned late afternoon, his face a mask of casual indifference that barely concealed the tension beneath. I watched him try his usual charm, the practiced smile that once made my heart flutter, but now it looked hollow, like a faded costume. I didn't flinch as he crossed the threshold. Instead, holding out the folder, "I'm done waiting," I said quietly. "Here are the papers." His eyes widened in shock, scanning the stack of documents. "Rachel, what is this?" His voice cracked, disbelief turning into desperation. I could see the old man I loved, struggling to surface beneath the facade. "This is the end of us," I told him steadily. "I've given you every chance, every ounce of trust, but you chose to betray me financially, emotionally, completely. The lies, the secrets, it's all here. I'm not the naive woman you thought I was." Brandon stumbled backward, clutching at straws. "Please, let's talk. I can fix this. We can work it out." I shook my head. No more lies, no more excuses. Charlotte's influence was apparent now more than ever. Just as Brandon's protests grew louder, a familiar notification pinged on my phone, a TikTok livestream notification. Curiosity mixed with dread as I opened it to see Charlotte front and center, live and unapologetic, boasting about helping women find their worth and taking control of their lives. It was a bitter irony watching her preach empowerment while simultaneously destroying mine. The live stream suddenly shifted. Brandon appeared beside her, nervous, trying to laugh it off, but the tension was palpable. I watched, heart pounding, as they unveiled their twisted version of events, painting me as the villain, the unreasonable wife who couldn't appreciate Brandon's efforts. It was a public spectacle, a performance to manipulate public opinion and protect their reputations. But I had something more powerful than lies and smokescreens truth. With Elijah's help, we filed the papers that night. The legal process was swift. Evidence of fraud, misuse of funds, and emotional abuse made the case airtight. Brandon was served with divorce papers along with a cease and desist order, barring him from accessing any of my accounts. It was a small but satisfying victory. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Brandon reached out repeatedly, texts, calls, even showing up unannounced, pleading, apologizing, trying to claw back a piece of what he had destroyed. I stayed firm. Every interaction reminded me of the pain, but also fueled the fire within me to move forward. Friends and family divided. Some reached out to support me. Others sided with Brandon, blinded by his charm or their own denial. I found solace in my blog, where I shared my journey of betrayal, resilience, and rebirth. Messages poured in from strangers who saw their own pain reflected in my words. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone, and that healing was possible. Then came the final blow to Brandon's facade. The private investigator uncovered more than I had imagined: financial records showing falsified documents, secret bank accounts, and even contracts signed without my consent. The betrayal was deeper than I had thought. Charlotte's involvement went beyond emotional manipulation. She was complicit in a scheme to siphon money and control the narrative. I knew I had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The scars remained not just on my heart, but etched in every corner of my life. Yet, with every step, I reclaimed a little more of myself. Standing alone in the quiet house one evening, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened: the heartbreak, the rage, the relief. Tears flowed freely, cleansing and raw, but beneath it all was a fierce, unbreakable resolve. This was my reckoning, and I was ready for whatever came next. The days after the final confrontation blurred into a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. The divorce was finalized sooner than I expected. Brandon's name was off the lease. his access to our accounts revoked permanently. The man who once promised forever had become a stranger living only in my memories and the painful lessons I carried. But losing him wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. Freed from the web of lies and manipulation, I began to reclaim my life piece by piece. I returned to the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. Each patient I cared for, each life I helped save, became a reminder of my strength, resilience, and the worth I had always deserved. The blog I started during those darkest nights took on a life of its own. Self-worth. After sacrifice wasn't just about my pain. It became a beacon for others trapped in toxic relationships. Messages poured in from women across the country who had felt invisible, unheard, or betrayed. Sharing my story was no longer just catharsis, it was a mission to empower. Yet healing is never linear. Some nights, the shadows crept in, memories flooding back like tidal waves. I missed the man Brandon pretended to be, the laughter, the small acts of kindness that had once made me believe in us. But I refused to let those moments imprison me. Instead, I turned them into fuel for growth. Charlotte disappeared from my life as quickly as she had appeared. The same social media platforms she used to spread poison became her undoing when others exposed her manipulations. Her empire of influence crumbled. A stark reminder that deceit can only stand so long in the light of truth. Friends I thought I had lost came back, drawn by the honesty and strength I now embodied. My parents stood steadfast, proud of the woman I had become, and new connections blossomed, friendships founded on mutual respect and genuine care. One afternoon, as I sat by the window of my modest apartment, I reflected on the journey, from the depths of betrayal to the heights of self-discovery. I had transformed pain into power. The scars I bore were no longer symbols of defeat, but emblems of survival. I had learned that love isn't about sacrifice to the point of erasure. It's about mutual respect, support, and most importantly, self-worth. No one deserves to be anyone's backup plan or to fund someone else's betrayal. With a smile, I closed my laptop on another blog post, a message to those still searching for their voice. You are worthy, you are enough, and your story isn't over yet. As the sun set outside, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, I felt a quiet peace. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. And this time, I was in control. Sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the strongest victories. In reclaiming myself, I found freedom, and that is the greatest revenge of all.